Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're talking about Go Collect's hottest trending comics for the week of October 30th. Now, for those who don't know, Go Collect puts out weekly articles that analyze the hottest selling comic books based on volume of sales and sudden increase in movement in the market. So think of these 5 books as the most liquid this last week. I'm sure you guys already know this, and I give this speech every single Monday. But hey, there's always new viewers on the channel, and I got to make sure that you guys know what we're talking about here. But, of course, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I would appreciate it. Also, don't forget, SwaggleHouseComics.com. Head on over to the shop, pick up a copy of Sanity, getting ready to run the Kickstarter for issues 2 and 3. Going to be very, very exciting. Come over here, maybe pick up some merch. You know, we got some Sanity merch, we got some swag merch, we got some coffee cups, things like that. You can head over here to the YouTube channel, hit that join on the memberships area. A lot of cool stuff going on here. You know, a lot of interesting things. You know, if you want to support me, support my endeavors over here, support my comic book, I would really appreciate it. But with all the housekeeping out of the way, let us get into this video here today. Of course, I will put a link to this article in the description. It is written by Matt Tuck, but I'll give you guys my breakdown alongside his. And coming in here at the number 5 spot is a very cool book, one that actually I think now is a good time to add this into the collection. I think I might want to pick up a copy myself, but of course we're talking about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic number 9, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 96th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book that came out in 2006, written by John Miller, that would feature the first appearance of the character known as Darth Revan. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I played a ton of Knights of the Old Republic back in the day, one of my favorite video games of all time. And this, of course, was that sort of video game comic book adaptation that would feature the first appearance of the character that actually came out of that video game. Now, it's been always sort of my belief and thought that they should have given the Revan storyline to Rey in the sequel trilogy, but that's neither here or there. The character of Revan has been one of the EU's best creations out there in the Star Wars universe, and a lot of people had been speculating for quite some time that we might see Revan show up in one of these new, Star Wars movies or Star Wars TV shows or whatever the case may be. And this was a book that was actually very heavily speculated on. Of course, Star Wars spec, always really tricky with that one. We've seen how much the Star Wars books have corrected after all the shows, or how much the books have fallen off when we actually didn't get them showing up in these TV series. So really difficult to predict what these comics values are going to be in the future. But either way, this is still a very cool comic book for a very cool character, and one that I think is actually in that sweet spot of the year 2006, where it's not that easy to find, not that easy to get, and it shows in the numbers. But as we dig into those numbers, let's take a look at them here together. 1,003 universal copies on the census, not too many overall. 98s have 293, fair market value 700, 30-day moving 656. Of course, the 656 is certainly a lot lower than what we saw in 2021, where the record sold price was $1,900. I mean, absolute monster numbers right there. Like a lot of books, this has been on the slide for month after month, but has basically sort of found its floor in the last kind of calendar year or so. We're seeing sales from that $720 range to the $600 range, back up to the $700 range, and the last sale actually going for really low, auction on eBay at $568. And that might be one of the reasons why it's showing up on the list this week, is that now is the cheapest time that you've ever had to pick up copies of this book. Then, of course, 2006 book, not going to see it slapped at the low grade, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, typically you can see them being sold around that $100 to $150 to maybe $200 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. All right, let's move on now to the 4th hottest trending comic of the week. And the 4th hottest trending comic of the week is an interesting one to talk about, kind of a multifaceted story right here. But of course, we're talking about Amazing Spider-Man number 1 facsimile edition, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 57th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book that came out in 2022, although this is the facsimile, so it is the reprint of the 1962 book, Amazing Spider-Man number 1, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko. That would be the first issue of the Amazing Spider-Man series, the second appearance of Spider-Man, the first appearance of the Chameleon, and the first meeting of Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. Of course, in this particular instance, we're going to talk about the facsimile version. Now, we've talked a little bit about facsimiles here on the channel before. I personally am not a fan of them, but I do realize that a lot of people, like to just sort of have them. They're maybe kind of fun to collect, or a fun way to, still read, these old stories and have that tactile feel. The facsimile books are an interesting one because, surprisingly, they actually do sell for more than that of cover price in a lot of instances, especially when you're talking about certain books like this one right here, ASM #1, or the facsimile of AF-15 actually always still has a bit of demand out there. The facsimile of some of the other mega keys like FF1 or X-Men 1 actually have a little bit of resale value. It's very interesting to kind of look at the facsimile market and kind of see how it moves out there. But I think a lot of people do just sort of enjoy keeping these books. You just got to be careful for the facsimiles that are like the UF4 facsimile or the Edge of Spider-Verse facsimile that actually look like dead-on copies of the original books. But of course, as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. Census has it at 1,138 universal copies. 9.9s actually have 16 on the census. I'm surprised they gave out so many 9.9s for this. 9.8s, 1,058. Fair market value, $50. Basically a book that, maybe people just like to collect. They like to have, this thing sit on the shelf. As you can see, not necessarily a book that's going to take you to the moon or hold any sort of value, but a fun book to have as a decorative piece and a collectible for that of Amazing Spider-Man #1. All right, let's move on now to the third hottest trending comic of the week. And the third hottest trending comic of the week is a book that, it's finally moved on to that sort of next best thing, a character that we've been talking about many times over here recently. Of course, we're talking about Lobo #1, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 49th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book written by Keith Griffin that came out in 1990 that would feature the first solo series for the character of Lobo. Now, of course, Omega Man #3, the first appearance of Lobo, has been a book that has been pretty hot out there in the market for quite some time. A lot of people are speculating that Jason Momoa is basically a lock to be playing Lobo in the James Gunn universe. And of course, Omega Man #3 had a lot of movement out there. But, once things get too hot, once things, start to move, obviously the market eventually will find its way to those next best things. Okay, what's Lobo's second appearance? What is his first meeting to Superman? What is his first solo series? What are cool Lobo covers? I mean, the market eventually moves on to other opportunities around this character. So it was only a matter of time before Lobo #1 showed up on the list this week. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 1,290 universal copies on the census, actually 199. That one is pretty interesting. 9.8s have 645, fair market value 110, 30-day moving is 101. And like a lot of other books, this is one that shot up in 2021, had a massive correction. And for the most part, I mean, this has been a $100 book, for the last few years or so, actually going all the way back to 2014, you had a sale of $101, and here in 2023, you have a sale for $101. So not necessarily a book that is going to take you to a moon, but a book that is always going to have a little bit of value and a little bit of demand out there in the market. Then, of course, down here at the bottom, not going to see it slabbed to low grade, but when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, typically you can see them being sold around that $10, maybe $15 level, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. All right, let's move on now to the second hottest trending comic of the week. And the second hottest trending comic of the week is a return of a modern classic right here. One of the books that, is getting really hot due to the return of this show. But of course, we're talking about Invincible #1, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 38th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, it's the book that came out in 2003, written by Robert Kirkman, that would feature the first appearance and the first issue of the series known as Invincible. Now, if you guys are not familiar with the character of Invincible, obviously one of the creations of Robert Kirkman, who also created The Walking Dead, Invincible has a series right now on Amazon that a lot of people love. It's an animated series. I think Steven Yeun is the voice of the Invincible character. And this is an interesting one. I mean, it's definitely not, the most common book as far as modern are concerned. It is one that I think is still trying to sort of find its footing. It's got a good pedigree to it based on, Robert Kirkman creating it. Obviously, the series is doing a lot for the values here. And it'll be interesting to see what this book is able to do in, say, the next 5 years. I'm sure we're going to get, seasons 3 and 4 and 5 of Invincible. But much like The Walking Dead, you have to be a little bit careful with these ones because I do think that there's going to be a time when they're not as relevant to pop culture and they're going to have some pullbacks and some corrections. But I do think that, generally speaking, this is a book that a lot of comic book collectors would like to have in their collection. But as we dig into the numbers of this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 1,604 universal copies on the census. Not too many overall. 9.8s only have 378. Fair market value, $3,700. 30-day moving, $3,503. So definitely a book that is very pricey at the 9.8 level. This was a book that, back in 2020, though, was only at that $875 range. So you have to wonder if this one is still a little bit inflated overall based on COVID money. And on top of that, the show that has just come out, obviously it shot up to the $5,000 range in 2021 and has had its pullback, had its correction, as low as the $2,000 price point in 2022. And now is kind of feeling that lift once again. You can tell that there are a lot of people excited about this one. I mean, just look at how many sales there were in this month alone here at the 9.8 level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 sales all coming in the wake of season 2 back at it. So very, very interesting to see this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you guys think that this is a book that's going to have legs, say 20 years from now, or is this a little bit more a flash in the pan? Then of course down here at the bottom, still going to be some value for this book overall because it is such a cool key at this point. But when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, typically you see them being sold around that $500 for a low grade, and I would say $1,000 at the minimum for a book that is in near mint condition. All right, let's move on now to the hottest trending comic of the week. And the hottest trending comic of the week is a classic book right here, one that everybody knows, one that everybody has in their collection. Of course, we're talking about ASM number 252, newsstand edition, up 14 spots, now in the number 5 slot, ladies and gentlemen. Number 5 slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, the book that came out in 1984, written by Roger Stern, that would feature the first appearance of the black symbiote suit. Now, of course, you guys know this book. Of course, you guys know why everybody likes to collect it. I mean, it's the homage to AF-15. It's the first black suit. So many Venom collectors out there, so many Spider-Man fans out there. Everybody wants to have this book in their collection. Now, as to why it's getting hot this week, well, I suppose you could point to the fact that the Spider-Man 2 video game came out, and the storyline in that video game has a lot to do with Venom and the black suit and all that sort of stuff. So that could be one of the reasons why people are gravitating to this book. But, really, this is one of those books that in any given week is going to have tons of sales out there. There's always demand for this book. There are always people looking to buy it, looking to sell it. It is, heavily printed, but also heavily desired. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. Now, we're talking about the newsstand edition. While I do think that 1984 is a year where newsstands shouldn't matter, at least anecdotally speaking, when you look at, the sales figures, it does seem like newsstands, even in this year, are more rare at the 9.8 level. 9.8 newsstands, as you guys can see, only have 49 on the census, and that's one of the reasons why this book is still so expensive at that range. $1,650 fair market value, 30-day moving is still $1,762. And as you guys can see, this is a book that, yes, it did shoot up in 2021, but generally speaking, it's still a pretty expensive book. Even at that $1,800 level, this is not a book that has corrected at the same rate as some of the other, sort of copper age keys that we've seen. And again, it has everything to do with the newsstand factor. Only 7% of copies out there that are graded are actually hitting this 9.8 level in the newsstand condition. So, if this is your book, if this is your ultimate grail, Black Suit Spider-Man is your favorite character or your favorite comic book, I think that the 9.8 newsstand is probably the one that you want to have in your collection. Then, of course, down here at the bottom, not going to always see it slapped to the low grade. I mean, the values definitely move more in line to the direct edition, where you see, 9.0 selling for $200, and then a 7.0 selling for $179, and a 6.5 selling for $100. And I would say that that's pretty accurate overall, because when you go onto eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, even in the newsstand edition or the direct edition, they're still going to set you back around that $100 to $120 range, depending on the deal and depending on the grade. Well, that is all I have for this video. Those were Go Collect's hottest trending comics for the week of October 30th. Let me know what you guys think about this list. Do you guys own any of these books? Of course, thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you all in the next one.